Hey guys, I'm NH Designs and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today I'm showing you a book that was given to me back in January by my friend Tia Cosplay, at least I think that's how you pronounce her name. I will have her details down below. But it is a book about the history of English costume, and she gave this to me because she knew it was something that I was really interested in. The really cool thing about this book is that it's actually a historical book about costume history. This book is almost 100 years old. So the book is called English Costume and is both illustrated and written by Dion Clayton Calthrop. And it was originally written in 1906, and this copy was printed in 1926, which is really, really cool. So something really neat about this book is not only are those dates associated with it, but someone owned this book beforehand and wrote and they actually signed their name and dated it as well. Marie Pearson, 11th of May, 1930. So I think that's really neat. The writing is all faded and everything too. And there's a few other points where little notes are made about certain subjects in the book. Looking at the paper cover here, it not only mentions that there's illustrations, but it actually shows two of the illustrations. One on the side of the book here, and also one on the front. The back just has some descriptions of more of the books that this particular publishing agency had put out. But what's really cool is the original fabric cloth cover. It's absolutely beautiful and it's hidden underneath this paper cover. It has, I don't know what to call them, but they almost look like little mural or mosaic type illustrations on them with different costume history points on them. And these beautiful kind of floral looking designs on them. It's absolutely beautiful, and I will definitely be keeping the paper cover on it just for the sake of protecting it. So the most interesting part about the way that this book is written happens to be the way it's categorized or divided into chapters. Most costume history books, whether it's a textbook or an actual nonfiction novel that you're sitting down to read, is that they're divided by decades or by when the fashions were changed. Because of course, the farther back you go, the slower fashions evolved. So one chapter might just be 100 years, another might just be a decade, depending on how fast things were changing. Typically, a chapter changes when the fashions all evolved and changed with it. This one, since it's from an English perspective, so England, it's divided by the reigning monarch of the time. So what makes that extremely interesting is that when you think about it, certain monarchs ruled for a very long time and other ones reigned for very little. Edward VI only actually reigned for 6 years. His older sister Mary only for 5. But then their sister Elizabeth, the Queen Elizabeth, reigned for over 4 decades. A lot happened in fashion when she was reigning compared to her siblings. So the chapter differences are pretty ridiculous. So Henry VIII has quite a huge chapter in here compared to his son Edward. I do find it really interesting also in the writing style. Instead of just saying the facts on the costume and what was happening, it actually details a lot about the reigning monarch. So it's not just, here's who is reigning, here's how long they're reigning, and then here's what people were wearing. No, they actually talk a lot about who it was who was in power at the time. To give an example, Henry VIII's chapter begins with a little bit of prose talking about him, and then, so with songs and music of his own composition comes the richest man in Europe to the throne of England. Gay, brave, tall, full of conceit in his own strength, Henry, a king, a tutor, a handsome man, abounding in excellence of craft and art, an inheritance from his father and mother, figures in our pageant, a veritable symbol of the Renaissance in England. And it goes on a little bit just about him and his historical importance and just who he was as a person. Most textbooks I read, or just books about costume history in general, they will talk a little bit about who was in power because of course they were influencing the fashions a lot, but they won't actually go into the history of them too much unless it pertains to the fashion history. This one goes into a lot of detail. So the chapter on Edward VI is actually a pretty lengthy one, even though he was only around for 6 years, and the fashions didn't evolve that quickly during his reign. So it's extremely interesting that it's written in this format. The other thing of note in here is that the author is also the one who did all the paintings in the book, and there are over 61 in color. When looking around, it has the men and women of each era displayed in color. Beautiful, I believe it's watercolor paintings. And it's really neat to look at all the different ones, and they also seem quite accurate from what I know. I am not a history expert. I've read many books, I've done some research just for fun sometimes, but I wouldn't call myself an expert. But from what I'm looking at, they seem pretty close. They seem quite accurate. And they're also all absolutely beautiful. The artist, the author, was very, very talented. The other thing of note is that there are smaller black and white illustrations throughout the book to detail certain things. So it shows what the silhouettes looked like and all the different variations of, say, shoes, a whole bunch of really, really neat things. There's a lot of interesting visuals in this book, as well as lots of information. So all in all, this book is absolutely fascinating. I love that it's written from the perspective of someone who's not modern or around today. I love that it's written by someone whose fashions we study now. That must be absolutely mind-blowing. I don't think that the author ever really pictured people 100 years later reading his book about costume history, where we are now reading the history of his era of fashion. So I think that's really, really cool. And while this is not a book I will just be lending out willy-nilly to friends, it is one that I will gladly allow friends to take a look at because it is so interesting and so neat and beautiful, honestly. Well, not so much this cover, but the undercover, gorgeous. It's definitely one of the most interesting pieces in my costume and costume history bookshelf. So thank you guys so much for following along and taking a look at this book with me. I hope this was slightly interesting to some of you, maybe pique some interest more in costume history for others. So if you like this kind of video, be sure to let me know down in the comments, and be sure to like, subscribe, and all that good stuff so you can see when my next video comes out. Bye guys.